All right, welcome everybody to the top three swing faults you can correct at home webinar. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. If anybody is on and could just type into the chat for me, let me know you can see my screen share okay and you can hear me okay. That would greatly appreciate it. I don't want to get rolling here until I am certain that everybody can hear me, see me. All right, excellent. Sounds good. Sounds good. So welcome everybody. I'll give a couple people here just a minute or two to hop on before we really get rolling. Appreciate the feedback, everybody. But welcome. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. It certainly appreciate you taking the time to invest in yourself, invest in your health, invest in your golf game. Hopefully, all the above. Certainly, these are interesting times for those of you that don't know that. I don't think that's news to anybody, but I would say for my own good that this has probably forced my hand to do something like this, like a webinar. So this is the first time that I'm doing something like this, and I am doing this from the comfort of my home office. So I apologize in advance for any significant technical difficulties or interruptions from the dog or anything of that nature. But again, welcome. For those that are willing to type into the chat, and I'll keep my eye on the chat. First of all, I can't see anybody on this webinar, and you guys can't see me, but feel free to type questions into the chat or into the Q&A section as we go. I'll keep my eyes peeled on it. But for anybody that is on already, I guess the first question I have is who is on this webinar because they're specifically struggling with something in their golf performance that they want to improve, or because they are struggling with enjoyment of the game because of how they're feeling. So if you could just type in and let me know, if anybody has anything specific, I want you to certainly let me know as we go through tonight, and let me know if there's certain things we can talk about. But the goal tonight is to really talk about, I'll keep my eye on the chat as we go, but the goal tonight is to really talk about the top three swing faults that we see with the golfers we work with, and ultimately how your body is the thing that is dictating those swing faults. And so if we can improve these, if we can identify these swing faults and then we can improve the body appropriately, it should help improve swing patterns. It should help ease your low back pain, and it should help easily add 15 to 30 yards. So that's kind of the first question that I have is who has specific problems, and let's try to identify those tonight, even if they're not things that I'm presenting on. The second question I have, if you're not in that first category, is who is here because they are bored and had nothing better to do, because that would be something of interest as well. So let's get rolling here. So basically, for those who don't know much about me yet, certainly I see some familiar names on the chat. But for those of you who might be new to what I do and what we do, my name is Dr. Eric Wallace, and we work with a lot of individuals who are in pain and are struggling, with doing what they want, movement-wise, performance-wise, and so we've taken the golf niche and really taken it head on. And I guess I'll tell you the background story on me and kind of how I came to be working with golfers, because it's a little bit of a unique story. I'm a late bloomer to the game of golf. Did not play in high school, did not play in college. Really fell in love with it after all of that. And in the last 7-8 years, I would say I'm not playing as consistently as I'd like, but in the time that I'm playing more, one of the favorite things that I've been doing and we've been doing is we'll have a annual brothers weekend. And typically a couple of my brothers are on the call, I believe, but typically our annual brothers weekend, we'll cram in 36 to 40 holes a day, and we'll play 2-3 days in a row. And so about 5 years ago, I was finishing up with this weekend, and I was on my way back to Milwaukee from up north, and I stopped to get gas. And I remember like it was yesterday that I almost literally could not get out of my car because my back was so jacked up. And it was no other than, from playing golf all weekend and probably not having the best hydration and nutrition and some of that stuff as well. But it was kind of eye opening, right? So it's eye opening because at this time I was a licensed physical therapist. I was starting to really enjoy golf. Wasn't playing it as much as I'd liked, and certainly not as good as I would have liked. But in my head at that time, I said, well, what is this all about? Why is golf the alleged beer drinking, cigar smoking, we are not athletes sport? Why is this sport of all things the thing that's causing my back to essentially blow up? And what can I do about it? I had played 3 years or 3 sports in high school and had never once had time lost in my sport due to injury. And so it was eye opening to me about, why now and why with golf. And so there's different things in terms of obviously health, nutrition, that always can be done better, right? But I started to nerd out on why is golf causing back pain. And at this time, like I said, I was a licensed physical therapist. So I investigated, probably went on, did a Google search and said back pain with golf and rotational athletes. And of course, one of the first things that popped up was the Titleist Performance Institute. And the Titleist Performance Institute, for those of you who aren't aware from it, it's basically Titleist's version of allowing golf professionals, medical professionals, and fitness professionals to get educated on golf and how to assess the golf swing, how to improve golfers. If we're in the medical track, we're typically dealing with pain or dysfunction. If we're in the fitness track, we're dealing with performance. And so I went and we did the first weekend seminar that I went to was in Chicago, and that's why I'm where I am at today. I fell in love. It was fascinating. I loved the biomechanics of it. I loved the fact that it was such a dynamic movement. There's certainly, all hands on deck in terms of your body has to be there, your technology has to be there, your mental aspect has to be there. And personally, growing and starting to love the game more and more, I knew it was something that would help me. And these were individuals that I wanted to continue to work with, because golfers, in my estimation, are underrepresented in terms of health and fitness and what we do for our bodies to improve that. So long story long, that's gotten me to the point where I have my own practice now. Primary portion of our niche, I'd say 30 to 40%, is working with golfers. I also have done some work on the PGA Tour. There's a time frame where I thought maybe I'd get as aggressive to get out and work with PGA professionals, and I went out and worked with a couple of players at different events, thanks to a mentor of mine. And I even considered, is this what I want to do for a living? Is travel the country and follow the golfers around and do that. So that's where we're at today. I've written multiple articles and numerous guides. I'm in process of writing a hard copy book, and really what we're all about is golfers that are in pain. We're trying to help you get out of pain. Golfers that want to improve their body to improve their performance, we're trying to help that. I will tell you from the get-go, I am not a swing coach, and I'm not somebody that's going to be giving you golf lessons, right? I'll leave that to those experts, and we have plenty of people that I can refer to appropriately. But as we get into here in a little bit, your body is very, very important for the golf swing, and it's very underrated. And so, that's what a large portion of tonight's going to be about. So as we move forward here, the key points to consider as we go forward into the session tonight is really the importance of your body, right? Importance of your body for the golf swing. So I had a person that I respect and admire quite a bit, tell me that the impact is the only thing that matters, the impact of the club with the ball. So we focus a lot on golf posture and golf technique and swing and all these different things. But this individual was pretty adamant that when the club hits the ball, that's the only thing that matters, because that's going to dictate what the ball does, short of environment, wind, terrain, all those different things. So there's a cause and effect there, right? The cause is the club, the effect is the ball. But what is the cause for the club? That's the body, right? So your club, your swing plane, your face, all the swing path, the speed, all these things are directly dictated by your body. And so it would behoove us to really focus on our body to make sure that we can get the club in the position we want, get the swing speed that we want, take the club path that we want, and make sure that we're maximizing that, right? Later on, I'm going to introduce you and for lack of better terms, kind of sell you on our program called the Bogey Free Back Program. And really what it's all about is making sure that you don't ever have a bad hole or a bad swing because of your body. It can be the mental, it can be the technique, it can be the whatever happened last hole is still in your head. But there's no reason that it should be our body that's affecting our game, because that's the one thing that we can ultimately control. Number two is that golf is a transfer of energy. So as we move forward here in the importance of the body, really what's happening in the golf swing is it's just a transfer of energy. So we're using the ground to transfer energy through our feet, into our lower body, into our torso, into our arms, into the club, into the ball. And so if you've ever heard anybody talk about swing sequencing or swing efficiency, swing repeatability, this transfer of energy becomes really, really important, right? Notice the club and the ball are the last portion of that relationship or that equation. So you want the body, again, to be transferring energy from the ground through your hands to the club as efficiently as possible and in the right order. And number three, pain, potential for pain, repetitive physical trauma, anxiety, past injuries, these all cause swing inhibition. And what I mean by swing inhibition is you're not able to really tap into the full potential of what you have in terms of swing speed, body turn, power, thoughtless, fearless movement, essentially. And so we have to address these things first, right? And I'm talking things and believe it or not, I'm talking things as simple as an ankle sprain from high school, a slip on ice and smack your butt. Some of these things are very, very underrated in terms of how they're inhibiting your movement. And with something like the golf swing, it is very important that everything is efficient and smooth and to the max so that you can really perform the way that you want. So a lot of our information tonight you're going to hear just because I believe in it, I like it, but they're also really, really solid sources. I would advise you, if you don't do any work in the near future with us, that you go on to the Titleist Performance Institute website. They have a lot of great articles and self-help tips, things like that. But we're taking a lot of our information from them tonight because that's who educated us, and we feel confident that they're the leaders in this information right now. And you're going to hear my own personal spin on some of this stuff, of course. So the keys to great ball striking, right? First of all is good sequence. We just talked about that. A good sequence is the key to consistency and accuracy. So the sequence, again, is ground, legs, torso, arms, club, ball. So in order for you to be consistent, repeatable, and accurate, that sequence needs to pretty much be on point every single time. If it's not, there's too many external variables or other things on the course, other things mentally, other things with how you're feeling that will really, really affect your ball striking. Second, and more in the realm of power, right, for those looking for distance off the tee or more distance with their longer irons and hybrids, is what we call segmental stabilization. And that's just a fancy word for essentially how strong and stable are you where you need to be in your body so that you can speed up and slow down efficiently, all right? So we're going to talk about this again in the future, in the near future, but you need your pelvis and your lower body to be able to speed up and start the downswing and then decelerate and slow down so that something else can speed up. You need your torso to be strong and stable so that you can speed that up as quickly as you need and then slow it down and kind of stabilize and decelerate, all right? So notice these first two things, sequence in terms of consistency and accuracy, and segmental stabilization in terms of power, they both have more to do with the body than anything else. So when we talk about the facets of golf, we talk about the body, the strength and conditioning. Then we talk about the tools, the technology, your clubs. We talk about the mental game, right? Well, in this graphic right here, 2 of the 3 things that are keys to great ball striking come from the body. All right. So the third is center face, square face contact, and nobody would question that, right? I leave that in there, and I make that an important piece of this, because what I want to elaborate on again is that I'm not naive to the fact that you can play really, really good golf with a crummy body, or with some of these other things not being ideal. If you have great hands, if you have enough playing time, if you've been swinging a club since you're 2, I mean, all these things are going to help you have a more likelihood of having center face, square face contact with your club face. But that's a small percentage of people. You know, the percentage of people that really have great hands and can make up for the lack or limitations in their body is pretty minute. So that's important. You're going to have people that score well without the first 2. You're going to have people that play really good golf without the first 2. I would question if they're going to be consistent. I would question if they're going to be able to do it for a long time, and I would question if they're going to enjoy their time playing. So moving a little bit more specifically in, and hopefully everybody's doing well. Again, I'm keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A here. Make sure if anybody has any questions, that they're getting them into that Q&A, and we'll have time at the end to answer them. Or you can answer them or ask them as we go, and I'll make sure I keep an eye on the chat or the Q&A here. So we're going to talk about three swing characteristics tonight. And really the goal of tonight, hopefully you got a little bit of space, you got a little bit of area that you can move and test yourself. You're not going to really need a golf club or anything like that. But the goal for tonight is to talk to you about these swing characteristics, talk to you about how your body is really ultimately what dictates some of these things, and then show you ways that you can self-assess to say, yes, this might be something that I struggle with, or yes, this might make sense to me, or no, this is a breeze and Eric doesn't know what he's talking about, and I can move on and enjoy my Wednesday night here. So I'm not going to go over in detail what these are yet, but early extension, you're seeing this is percentage of amateur golfers. So early extension, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it's basically the essential or the equivalent of you standing up in your golf swing. More than 60% of us amateurs deal with that. All right. Over the top, which is probably the swing characteristic that most of you have heard of or are familiar with, which is an outside to in swing plane. Over the top, we're looking at more than 40% of us amateur golfers. And then reverse spine angle, which again, maybe you've heard of, but it's a little bit less known, a little bit under 40%. All right. So if there are, let me see, there are 12 people on right now. 6 of us, at least 6 of us, probably more, are going to be dealing with one of these 3, if not multiple of these 3. And so, again, can you play good golf and have these things? Yes, of course you can, right? I'm not saying that that's the case, that because you have these things, you're going to be a crummy golfer and not score well. But I would question the consistency. I would question the enjoyment. I would question, are you maximizing your distance? And then ultimately, are you maximizing your performance? So the common characteristics that we see with each of these 3 swing characteristics that we're going to talk about tonight, right? And in my marketing, if you will, or the title for the webinar was swing faults. You heard me use the word swing faults. That was not a great title, and I'm going to say swing faults was probably a little more catchy and hopefully getting a little bit more people to open their eyes. But I don't use the word swing faults with individuals. I use the word swing characteristics. And the reason that's important for you to understand is that swing faults are not truly faults, because that would mean that you're doing them on purpose, or it's something that you're intentionally doing wrong. A swing characteristic is something that you do because it's your body's path of least resistance. You're just following in your golf swing what your body is capable of doing, or what your body is willing to do. And so with each of these 3 swing characteristics that we're going to cover tonight and basically self-test for, here's the big takeaways, right? You're going to have inconsistency with impact. You're going to have power loss, and there's a very strong chance you'll have some sort of back pain if you play a lot of golf with any of these swing characteristics. And so early extension, right? If early extension is kind of what's happening in the swing, what is the end result for a lot of people? A lot of these people are going to be hitting blocks and hooks. All right. So, I'll talk about why in a little bit, but you're going to see that be the end result with the ball flight is either an aggressive block or an aggressive hook. You're going to be feeling with early extension like your hands are trapped. And what that means is you're almost going to feel like your body is invading the space of your hands. And by the time the hands are about to make impact with the ball, you're not really going to know which way to go with them. All right. And then early extension, back pain is another key symptom of that swing characteristic. Over the top, which many of you may know about, over the top is more in regards to early extensions, more in regards to what your body is doing. Over the top is more in regards to what the club path is doing. And that is what we would call an outside to in club path. So as if you're a right-handed golfer, that's going to be a right to left golf, in relation to your target, a right to left golf path, plane. So those of you that have dealt with a slice, there's a strong possibility that an over the top club path is what you're dealing with. A outside to in club path, if you make an outside to in club path with a square face, the ball is going to rocket very aggressively to the left for a right-handed golfer. All right. So if you kept an outside to in club path and kept your club face square, you're going to have issues. So most of those compensations is to open up the club face a little bit with an outside to in club path and an open club face. The end result with the ball is to fade or aggressively slice to the right for a right-handed golfer. Power loss. I'm going to get into power loss in a little bit with the over-the-top pattern. A very, very key part for a lot of people off the tee. If you have an over-the-top pattern, there is a very specific reason why you're not hitting the ball as far as you want, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then increased spin. So for those of you that study, I guess, ball flight and some of those different dynamics, increased spin off the tee is not necessarily what we want. And an over-the-top pattern tends to increase spin loft, and usually that results in decreased distance as well. And then we have reverse spine angle, which is the third swing characteristic we're going to talk about tonight. Again, I'll go in each of these in a little bit more in detail. But the biggest thing with the reverse spine angle is back pain. All right. So somebody comes in, they say, yeah, every time I play, 9 or more holes, I start getting pain here, and they point to a spot. For a right-handed golfer, a lot of times it's going to be in the right lower back. And they will say that I feel like I don't want to really swing as hard. And I'm just struggling because it feels like my back is going to give out after a while. Reverse spine angle also causes club path problems. And it also, in that same regard, it causes a lot of our swings to be armsy or upper body dominant, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about more what those mean. So any questions so far? So Tish, how's it going? Thanks for hopping on. Sounds like I know what I'm talking about. Well, that's I guess that's half the battle, right? Some days I'm not so sure, but thankfully we've been able to work with enough golfers in person here and put some of this stuff to the test. And it seems to, there's always going to be your outliers and your extreme cases. no names mentioned, but yeah, hopefully we've worked with enough people here that gives us a little bit of credence now. So an avalanche of problems, right? And what's important to note is when we have one or two issues with the body, it typically can result in multitude of swing characteristic issues. So if you have, let's just say, for example, you have limited hip mobility, that's one thing in your body, right? That's one issue in your body, but it can cause 3 or 4 swing characteristics. And with swing characteristics, what I want people to know about is through my education and study of the swing with Titleist, we basically have 12 primary swing characteristics we're looking at. So there are some things technically with, with your hands and with setup and all these things. I'm leaving a lot of those things to the professionals that teach lessons and that teach the golf swing. A lot of my swing characteristics that I'm talking about obviously are biomechanics of the body and how they relate to the golf swing. Is reverse spine angle different than reverse pivot? That's a great question. We'll come back to that at the end, Tish. All right, I'll come back to that at the end. We're gonna have a live Q&A at the end here. So basically what's important with the body for the golf swing to eliminate this potential of an avalanche of problems, you want there to be basically mobility in your body where it's important to be mobile, all right? And you want to be strong and stable in your body where it's important to be strong and stable. And that sounds very common sense, but the problem is that if you're not mobile where you should be mobile, other things that should be stable become unmobile, right? And if you're not strong and stable where you should be, then other things that should be mobile become stable. And so it's kind of if you look at the dynamics of the body, we need things that are supposed to be mobile. Your hips, your shoulders, your neck, your ankles, we need them to be mobile. Where you should be strong and stable, your glutes, your core, your shoulder blades, your quads, we need them to be strong and stable. My PSA for the day is it is not enough to be flexible. No way, no how. You have to be more than that for an efficient golf swing, okay? The common thing I hear is I'm getting stiff and tight as I age, or if I could just get more turn, I'm feeling like something's tight. And so the common go-to is stretching, passive stretching, foam rolling. These things are good, they're beneficial, but it is not enough. Mobility is different than flexibility. Mobility is you being able to control your joints where they're supposed to be mobile through the full range of motion, and you completely own that 100%. So passive stretching and foam rolling, they're great, they're part of the equation, but they are not good enough to get you ready to swing a golf club, hopefully 70, 72 times, or not even that, full swing and around, all right? So let's get into the examples here. I'm trying to keep this webinar tonight under an hour, so I'll do my best here, but I want to leave it open for Q&A at the end and make sure we talk about any specific issues that people are having. So early extension, all right? So here's a picture example. You see the golfer on the left, he's taking his setup posture, and you see that line that comes up, it's right on his tailbone, right? It's right off his sit bones. You can imagine that wall would extend all the way up. It's almost like he's in his golf posture, leaning up against a wall, right? Now on the right side, he is most likely in this picture, he's most likely in his downswing. He's coming back to impact. But you've seen how far his hips and his tailbone have moved away from that dotted line, all right? And you notice how, for him, it would be the equivalent of basically standing up from a flexed position. So going from the position on the left to the position on the right is what we call extension, right? He's extending his spine, he's extending his hips. His body and his pelvis are moving closer to the ball. So his body is, his hips and pelvis are shooting towards the ball. He's standing up. Now, early extension can happen on the backswing. So you can set up with good posture and then take the club away and stand up and come out of that posture on your backswing. Or you can have that exact same thing, and this is more frequent for golfers, happen on the downswing. All right. So as they start really trying to transfer that energy from the ground through their body for a multitude of reasons, they stand up in the golf swing and they extend their body. All right. So you can get a little bit of a sense just looking at this picture, what would happen if he was actually holding a club and the ball was on the ground in front of him. His body, his pelvis would invade the space of where his hands should be. So on the left, if he had a club in his hand, he would have this shaft plane. And then as he took the club back down to the ball in the picture on the right, that shaft plane would probably be more vertical, and his body would literally be invading the space that his hands are supposed to have created. And so you can see where that would give you a sensation of your hands or your arms being trapped, right? Point number 2 that we talked about, just to recap on, is he's going from a position where his spine is mostly flexed on the left to on the right, he's extended, all right? So as your spine rotates, you go from a position of flexed to extended as you're rotating. Your back doesn't always agree with that, all right? The third thing here, and that comes into play with power, the third thing is you're going to lose a lot of power with this, right? It's hard in the position on the right it's hard for your glutes to be engaged, your core to be engaged. It's hard for you to really generate any sense of power and stability. And usually that's because your muscles aren't doing the work. And so you stand up so that you hope and pray that your joints and gravity will be your friend in that scenario. All right, so that's a picture of early extension. You can think about somebody on the backswing or the takeaway and then coming back down to impact. Those are the 2 points where those hips can kind of shoot forward and come off that line. On the left, an ideal situation, 99% of the PGA players, 99% do not early extend. You will see PGA players, if you watch them from a down the line view, LPGA, PGA players, their hips will go behind that line or they'll stay on that line. And a lot of times they'll go behind that line because as they rotate their pelvis, the pelvis is shaped like an oval. So a little bit of the hip, the glute will go behind the line. The right hip will go behind the line. And then as they come back down to impact, the left glute will go behind that line or behind the line. After impact, who cares? I mean, they can stand up and extend and do what they need to do. But you will see PGA players stay right on that line, and they'll keep their hips in that hinged position. What that does for them, it maintains angles, it maintains posture, it keeps their power position, and they are incredibly efficient and repeatable with their swing because of that. There's not a lot of moving parts. All right. So how to test yourself. Now's the time to get just a touch interactive. Certainly if you're just in this, having an adult beverage or eating some dinner and you're not in the mood to get up and move right now, no worries. We're going to send you a replay. You can try this stuff later on. But now's the time to test if you want to get interactive and ask some questions about it. What I'm trying to do with this is I'm trying to give you a sense of ways that you can self-assess if you might be struggling with these issues. There are very, very strong correlations on these physical screens that tell me or tell anyone that it would be very likely that you're actually doing that swing characteristic when you actually swing the club. So again, they're not end-all be-alls, and I'm not saying if you came in, this is everything that you would get to identify early extension, but they're very, very strong correlations, okay? So the first one is a deep squat assessment. The second one is a hip hinge on the wall with trunk rotation. I have video loaded here, so I'm going to bring it up. Hopefully, anybody has any problems seeing this, I'm going to be able to kind of pause it and slow it down and everything. Anybody has any problems seeing this, or it gets choppy, or they're not quite understanding what's happening, make sure you enter into the chat and let me know. So a deep squat assessment, right? Pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line my feet up, shoulder width, my toes are pointed straight forward. I bring my fingers behind my head, and I am going down into a squat pattern as deep as I can, right? As deep as I can, but without losing my angle of my spine. Now, what we're looking for with this, and I'll explain why this is important. What we're looking for is that my pants actually have that line on the side. That's a good thing. It gives us a little idea. I'm looking for my thighs to be parallel or below. I'm looking for my heels to stay flat. And then where I am struggling, right, and which is potentially the reason why I struggle with early extension to a certain extent, is that my shin, the angle of my shin, or the plane of my shin, you can see with that white line on the pants, should be parallel with the plane of my spine. And so with me, I'm probably getting to parallel with my thighs, but my spine angle is coming forward a little bit too much relative to the line of my lower body. Now, a lot of individuals are going to struggle with a deep squat. You might have knee pain, you might have pain, but if you can't even come halfway down or remotely close to a deep-ish squat and maintain some of these angles, it's going to be very, very challenging for you in your golf swing to maintain that posture where you keep the hips on that line, and as you rotate through, you don't come off and kind of early extend, okay? The reason being is that we can associate a squat, we can tell from a squat if somebody has good ankle mobility, if they have good knee mobility, if they have good hip mobility, and if they have good trunk stability. So there's a view from the front. Boy, don't I look like I'm having a blast. You can see I'm probably below parallel again. Heels are flat. Toes aren't flaring out. but that trunk wants to lean forward on the side angle. So I can identify myself that I should be working on trunk stability and core strength, and that might be a little bit bigger issue for me in terms of why I'm early extending. All right. So if you have knee pain, something that significantly precludes you from doing this, that's okay. I want you to identify, does it feel like you can get into it? Like you understand that pattern, like you can stay a little bit upright through your trunk. It's not going to be a perfect study or a perfect science for everybody. But that's the deep squat. So again, why it's important is ankle mobility and hip mobility, and then that trunk stability, right? Ankle mobility specifically, if you struggle because of tight ankles or ankle issues in your golf swing, it's going to be very, very common for you to want to stand up and early extend. So the biggest thing that we see with individuals that struggle with squatting is their ankle mobility and their hip mobility. And both of those are pretty important for maintaining that hip hinge and not letting those hips shoot forward towards the ball. Any questions on the deep squat pattern, make sure you let me know. Hopefully everybody's still with me. Everybody's having fun. So number 2, we got this interesting self-assessment. This is still for early extension. So this is hips glued on the wall trunk rotation. All right. This is kind of a fun one to do on your own at home. This is one where you're going to set up in your golf posture, and hopefully everybody can see the video. Okay. You're going to set up in your golf posture, and you're going to bring a club across the shoulders. And I'm intentionally slowing this video down. So if it's choppy at all on your end, it might be because I'm intentionally slowing it down. But you're going to set up in your golf posture. You're going to put your sit bones on the wall, and you're going to try to, from your golf posture with your sit bones on the wall, you're going to try to rotate your trunk. You're going to try to rotate your shoulders and your spine. And you're going to see how far you can go without letting either of the sit bones lift off of the wall. So your sit bones, both of them on each side, stay glued and pinned to the wall while you rotate your spine each direction. All right. Now, what's going to happen? There's 3 possibilities here. So the first possibility is, and I'm showing you right here, is I try to turn my trunk and maximize my trunk turn. My pelvis, or my one sit bone, lifts off, right? So I can't turn my trunk without my sit bone lifting off the wall there. So that's kind of the first problem, right? That's the first problem area. That tells me that I have a hard time keeping my hips hinged while I rotate my spine, all right? I don't have examples of, well, the other option is that you're going to be able to keep your hips glued and you're going to be able to rotate your spine. So that's kind of possibility number 2. So you can do that. You're in good position. You can get good rotation, and you can keep your hips both pinned on the wall in that golf posture as you rotate your spine. So that's one possibility. Other possibility, like I said, you can't keep both hips on. Now, the other possibility that I don't have on video here, or not well, is that you keep your hips pinned, but you can't turn your shoulders really hardly at all. All right. So if you keep your hips glued on the wall and you try to rotate your trunk and your shoulders and you're really, really tight, or you're really not able to move that much, that is another problem, because that tells us that you can keep your hips pinned. Maybe you're somewhat stable through the lower body, but you don't have any mobility or any ability to rotate your spine. And so when you're taking your golf swing, the only way that you're going to be able to get any rotation is to stand up in your golf swing and come off that wall. All right. So that's a self-assessment, which the first one focuses a little bit more, the deep squat focuses a little bit more on mobility of the lower body and trunk stability. This focuses on how well can you keep your hips loaded and hinged while you rotate your spine. If you struggle mightily with both of those, you're probably early extending in your golf swing. If you struggle with one of those, there's probably further research to be done. If you struggle with neither of those, you could still be early extending, but you're probably doing pretty darn good. All right. I'm going to just take a look at questions here quick. All right. So that's good. I'm glad to see my brothers are on, giving me a bigger head than I already have. Glad everybody can see video. Okay. So moving forward here, let's talk about over the top. So this is the second swing characteristic we're going to talk about tonight. Over the top is has to do a little bit more with our swing plane and our swing path. And so early extension has a little bit more to do with the body. Over the top has a little bit more to do with what the club is actually doing. It's still heavily determined by our body, but in terms of the swing characteristic, it's a lot more to do with the golf club. Over the top and dealing with swing plane is about as technical I'm going to get with somebody with the golf swing. Again, I am not a swing coach. I am not a golf professional. Those are the individuals, if you're looking for technical swing improvements and whatnot, after we've addressed some of these physical issues, I highly recommend multiple individual here and across the country, so I can let you know. But this is the closest I'm going to get to be able to talking a little bit more in regards to technique and how you can improve the club path to improve your scoring and your performance. So over the top is one that many of us are a little bit more aware of. Outside to in club path, right? Usually end result, most common result is it's going to cause that nasty slice. So with over the top, what we see here, this golfer, he's got that red, I don't know what you call that red path or that red section that's angling across his body down to the ground, right? So that red path, when we do 2D video analysis from a down the line view, we call that, and it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but we call that the slot. All right. So that is basically in some regards to where you set up with your original shaft plane and then where you were at the top of your golf swing or at the transition of your golf swing. We can set up a slot for each individual. And what that slot does, that red section, it tells us in what regards when we come back down to the ball to impact, where is that club path falling? All right. So you see with this individual here, he is literally over the top of that slot or over the top of that red area. His club path is going to be very vertical, right? Very up and down, very steep. And again, it's going to result likely in that club path coming from the outside to the inside. And I usually give the analogy of swinging an axe, right? If you were swinging an axe down at your knee, you're swinging down at knee height to chop some wood or something like that. We take an over-the-top approach with the swing. So that's what's happening with a lot of these golfers. Why over-the-top becomes important, right? So the biggest thing that I would say with over-the-top, besides, the ball flight of the nasty slice, is it is a distance killer. So any individual that oftentimes sees their miss or their swing or their ball strike miss be a slice are oftentimes going to be the same individuals that are wondering why they can't get more distance, regardless of how hard they swing, regardless of how much effort they put into their body and upgrade their clubs and all that. And the reason being is that off the tee, an over-the-top swing plane results in a steeper path of the club. And for a lot of individuals that have a steeper path of the club, they end up hitting down on the ball. Their attack angle is downward, right? And with the driver, we want the attack angle to actually be slightly upward on the ball. And if you are hitting down on the ball with a driver, you basically are going to be, you're going to be more likely to kind of pop the ball up and increase your spin, but you're certainly going to limit the ability for you to maximize what your body and your club are able to do if you're hitting down on the ball. So those of you that are looking for more distance, it would behoove you to identify if you have an over-the-top pattern and see if it's something that you can change. The other issue with an over-the-top pattern is just that you have a very, very hard time. What I would say is you have a very hard time rotating. Okay, so the most common cause, or the number one cause for over-the-top pattern, is a difficult time rotating your lower body and separating that from your upper body. So we call this is a fancy term called disassociation. So separating your pelvis from your torso and your torso from your pelvis. Individuals that are over the top with their pattern, they are that way a lot of times because they cannot rotate their pelvis and they cannot separate their pelvis from their upper body. And if you think about the physics of that, if you can't rotate your lower body and separate it from your upper body to start the downswing, what happens is you end up swinging and rotating your body in one giant block. It's like you're rotating like one giant block, and it's very hard to do anything with the club other than come over the top if you're rotating your entire body all at once. And so the term of disassociation, or separating your pelvis from your torso, becomes very important to be able to do if you want to have a little bit more of a neutral swing plane or an inside to out swing plane. So I hope that makes sense. You have to basically, for lack of better terms, all that crap that I just said, it's important, but for lack of better terms, if you can't rotate your body, you're going to swing over the top, because instead of rotating, you're going to use more vertical up and down forces to try to generate power instead of rotational forces. If you use more vertical up and down, the club is going to get more steep and more vertical, and it's like you're going to be swinging an axe. That's the best way it's the best analogy I can give you for an over the top pattern. So how do we figure out if we have the ability to rotate properly so that we're not likely to have an over the top swing plane? Pelvic rotation. Very, very simple test. Very, very, I hate to say it, but I'm always excited to test this on the golfers that I work with, because it's anybody's guess as to what it's going to look like usually. A lot of things are kind of predictable. This one is not. I have seen it all. So what we do with the pelvic rotation test in the golf posture is, and I'll ask you to try to test this on yourself right now or at some point in the near future. But what we do is we set up in our golf posture, all right? We bring the club across our shoulders to give us a little bit of feedback. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to imagine that I'm like a statue from my belly button up. So I want my torso, I want my core, I want my shoulders, I want my head. I want all that to stay like a statue, but I'm going to try to rotate my pelvis each direction, all right? So I'm keeping my shoulders and that golf club square in my golf posture while I try to rotate my pelvis side to side, right? So it's almost like if you had two headlights coming off the front of the pelvis, you're keeping your shoulders square and you're rotating those headlights side to side without coming out of your golf posture. If you can do that, there's a very good chance that whatever you're doing with your swing path, if it's coming over the top, it's got to be coming from something else. It's got to be coming from the upper body, your shoulders, poor technique, poor conditioning, whatever it might be, poor, that's how you've always swung. But here's an example of a lot of golfers, right? If I tell you to keep your shoulders square, a lot of us will rotate our hips, but we'll rotate our shoulders at the same time. We have a hard time with our brain and with our body just telling the pelvis only to rotate. The shoulders want to come along for the ride, all right? So that second example, that me right there, that's poor disassociation. I can only rotate my body as one piece. I can't separate my lower body from my upper body, and that's going to be a reason that I have a little bit more of an over-the-top swing plane potentially, okay? We want to be able to get really solid at rotating the pelvis independent of the shoulders, and there are all sorts of strategies to help you do that. If anybody has any questions about that, let me know. If you can do that test and you knock it out of the park, good for you, because that is whether you're a good golfer or have just started, that is tough for a lot of people to do. All right, and then lastly here, we're going to talk about reverse spine angle. Reverse spine angle is, again, going back to what is the body doing, has a little bit less to do with club path and club, what the club is doing, but it will be a direct determinant for what the club does eventually. So reverse spine angle, probably with individuals that golf and have issues with low back pain, the number one thing that we will see, or one of the most common swing characteristics that we'll see, is this reverse spine angle. And we'll talk about why. The golfer on the left here, as he takes his club back and he's at the, we'll say that's the estimated top of his backswing, right? You can see the white line. If he's a right-handed golfer, you can see how that white line on the left is leaning slightly away from his target, all right? That is, I don't really like on the bottom, I don't like correct versus not correct, because again, going back to, you're only doing what your body is capable of. So a lot of golfers don't know that they're doing this. They're just following what their body is letting them do. but that would be ideal to help with back health and to help power production, right? The golfer on the right, this is reverse spine angle. As you take the club to the top, your spine has actually started to lean towards your target. So there's a lot of reasons this can happen. I can't even go over all of them on this call, but the common thing for a lot of our male amateur golfers that struggle with back pain is that spine angle is leaning towards their target at the top of their swing. Now, really what's going to happen with this is you're going to see that you start in this flexed position. So you're in a good posture, right? You can see how his spine is still kind of what we call flexed or bent forward towards the ball, and he's rotating. In this situation on the right, he is coming out of his original golf posture. And so he started in a flexed position, but as he rotates, he's coming up into extension, and he's really extending his back towards its target. But he's going to have to come back down to the ball at some point and make contact with the ball, hopefully. So if you start flexed and you end up in that big extension, and then you come back down to a flexed position of the spine by impact, that is a lot of movement for the back to take on, especially while you're rotating. And this is the common area where golfers will have right-sided low back pain, or as they play, their back starts to stiffen up and they feel like over time their back might want to give way. They're losing energy, they're losing focus because their back is just talking to them. So the big issue that we see upper body wise is going to be mobility and flexibility, so shoulders and spine. If you're having a hard time rotating and getting the hands into the position you want because of mobility issues, then that's where you're going to see a potential need to reverse spine angle. I'm going to talk on the self-assessments tonight. We're going to talk a little bit more about glute strength and a simple test that you can do to see if your core can basically handle the demands of the golf swing. All right. So the first test is always a fun one. It's a single leg bridge test. I would encourage you to do this right now or shortly. But what we're going to do here, the glutes, the single leg bridge is going to test glute strength. It's going to test glute and hip strength. So if we have a hard time using our glutes in the swing, it's very, very common that we get sloppy in the bottom half and we're going to end up with a reverse spine angle of some sort. So for the single leg bridge test, you're going to bring the feet close together, knees are bent, feet are flat. You bring your hands up towards the sky, and what we're going to do is we're going to lift the hips. We do this, we call this a bridge. You lift the hips up, all right? And you try to get your body in a straight line from the shoulders to the knees, and then you kick one leg straight out. Now, the ideal is that you could hold this position for 10 seconds. My body is staying stable. My hips are not rotating. My butt is not dropping back to the ground. I'm just hopefully staying solid as oak, all right? Now, that must have been a good day for me. I have no idea what was happening there because that actually looks pretty solid, all right? You can tell I'm looking at the camera right now saying, I can't believe I just pulled that off. And I think on this other side here, I tend to exaggerate a little bit. But this right hip now is going to show you what can happen when we're not necessarily solid. So my left hip now, I'm testing my left hip. I bridge up, I kick my right leg out. You're seeing the pelvis rotate and drop. You're seeing me be shaky. You're seeing my butt kind of come closer to the ground. And then all of a sudden you see my core kind of want to tip and go over, and I can't hold that, right? Now, I think I was faking on this, but my left hip would be my lead hip, and I actually did struggle with my lead hip for a little while in terms of strength and stability. And so you'll see this. You'll see these asymmetries in golfers, and you'll be able to say trail hip, lead hip, that might be a reason for X, Y, or Z. But that single leg bridge test, it basically tells us, are your glutes and your core able to handle the demands of the golf swing rotationally? Can you load up your hip and not have your body completely become a mess and fall apart because of that? So common things that'll happen here. Number one, we'll get a lot of hamstring cramps. We'll get very, very tight in the hamstrings. We'll have to come down. We'll say, oh, I'm dehydrated. I didn't drink enough water today. Actually, in that scenario, if your hamstrings are cramping, you're just not using your glutes, right? Probably some glute weakness there, or in that pattern, you don't know how to activate the hips and the glutes so that the hamstrings go into overdrive. Some people, they don't cramp, but they look really shaky like I do on this left side here. They rotate, their hips drop, they topple over a little bit. Other people, they look pretty solid, but their back is straining like mad, and they get really, really tight through their low back. They look solid, but they would be deceiving because their back is doing all the work. That's not good. And then some rock stars just knock it out. They feel it in the butt. They look solid as oak, and they're probably good to go from at least that testing standpoint. The second thing that we look at, this is a really simple one you can do from home, but gives us a lot of information. So this is a simple test for hip sway. One of the reasons that you might have a reverse spine angle is if your trail hip, again, a right-handed golfer, their right hip would be their trail hip. If your trail hip is not solid and you can't load up that hip and engage your core, that is going to be a cause for reverse spine angle because the hip is sloppy, so your spine kind of leans towards the target. So this is a simple test. What you're going to do, preferably with a golf club, you're going to get into golf stance. You're going to load up the right leg, meaning you're in your golf posture, but you're going to put a majority of your weight through your right leg. That left foot is just in a kickstand position, all right? And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the club back as far as you can into your backswing without losing your balance, right? So you shouldn't fall to the right because that would mean you're not able to load the hip too much and you're cheating over to the right side. And you should not fall to your left because that would mean your default is to reverse your spine angle towards your target line, right? So you want to be able to get that club. And this is actually, I'm going to take some credit here. This is something that I came up with myself. This isn't a Titleist regulated screen, but you're going to want to be able to get that club at least arm parallel with the ground. If you can't get that left arm or that lead arm parallel with the ground when it's straight, without losing your balance and without really drastically losing posture, we know within the golf posture that you struggle loading that hip and using your core to kind of stay in a good hip hinged neutral spine angle, right? And so everybody should be giving that a shot. You can do this exact same test on your lead hip, and that'll give you some information about how your lead hip is doing. The lead hip is incredibly important for the golf swing as well, which is a conversation for another day. But that is a really simple test to say, can I load up my right hip? Can I load my core? And can I stay in a pretty good position without totally losing my balance? There's a lot of things happening here. If you struggle with this, there's a solid chance that you're going to be likely to have a reverse spine angle. Okay. So, a little bit of technical difficulties here. Bear with me. So first of all, while I'm reloading the PowerPoint here, make sure that you type into the comments if you have any questions about, load this up. If you have any questions about those three swing characteristics, make sure you let me know. Let's start slideshow back here. All right, so let's get through these here. Make sure you type into the comments though, any specific questions about any of those three swing characteristics, how to self-test, issues that you had with self-testing. I'd really appreciate any questions, any specific problems. Would a reverse spine angle lead to a steep swing? Paul, I would definitely say yes. It's hard to guarantee that by any means, but if you think about what happens is it's going to be very tough for you to take a reverse spine angle and then somehow get your body and your spine angle to go enough of the other way so that the path becomes more neutral or inside to out, right? So it's the default symptom of reverse spine angle is that the swing gets very armsy and the path is very steep. It's very, very hard to have a reverse spine angle and somehow find a way to get your club path neutral or even inside out. Because if you think about what your body would have to do, you'd have to have your body angle, your spine angle leaning towards the target at the top, And then somewhere between the top and impact, you'd have to get your spine leaning back away from your target again. So long story short, yes, it would be very, very different. Thanks, Judy. I appreciate that. So any other questions on those three swing characteristics? And then we'll go over into kind of the last portion of this here. I know we're getting on to closer to an hour, so appreciate everybody hanging on. Any other questions? I'm going to get back to Tish's question here. Is reverse spine angle different than reverse pivot? So I would say that the movement on video, Tish, is going to look very, very similar, because when your spine angle starts to lean towards your target, it's going to look like you're loading up on your lead foot a little bit more, right? Those of us that are doing ideally what we'd be doing is we go back to the top of the backswing, you would be primarily loading your trail hip and your trail leg. But reverse spine angle sometimes forces us to put more weight through our lead leg. So it would look very similar, Tish, but we kind of classify them as different things just because one has to do with the upper body and one has to do a little bit more with the lower body. They are going to look very, very similar. All right. Judy, I appreciate the feedback. Well, you know where I live. I'm happy to help you. Let's just make sure it's not because of pain. Always happy to be working on performance and talking more about golf than pain. So to kind of summarize then, what do we really need for an efficient golf swing? And I'll keep my eyes peeled for the Q&A here. For the session, everything checked out good. Also, any good exercise for increasing disassociation? Yeah, so I will, I'll reach out to individuals that are on, and if anybody has any specific questions, I'll make sure I pop them over a video or two. But yeah, there's a lot of exercise for increasing disassociation, Tish, and a lot of them have to do with giving you some help on the upper half of the body and getting really, really good at rotating the lower body. So setting you up for success, basically, and getting really solid with the pelvic rotation while you have some help, and then slowly taking the training wheels off and letting you work on it on your own. And let's see, answer that. So what do we really need for an efficient golf swing, right? And this list is not even all-inclusive. You heard me talk a little bit about we need to be mobile where we should be mobile, and we need to be strong and stable where we should be strong and stable. So from a mobility standpoint, ankles, knees, hips, thoracic spine, which is kind of the portion of your spine that your ribs attach to, shoulders, and neck. Those all need to be mobile. So if you're not mobile in all of those areas, something else will have to compensate and make up for that mobility if you want to have a full, efficient golf swing. Likewise with stability, single leg balance, glute hip strength, core strength, shoulder blade strength, grip strength, and then leg strength and ground reaction. A lot of our male and female amateurs are not powerful enough through their legs, probably because they're scared to jump, they're scared to load heavy, they're scared to do some of these things. The ground is where your money is going to be made in terms of distance, as well as in terms of being able to play a lot of holes, play repeated days without fatiguing and having wear and tear from an endurance standpoint. So you get a sense of you need a lot of things to be in check, and ideally we'd have a lot of things in check to have a really efficient golf swing. So I guess I'll throw it out open one more time for any specific issues that anybody has. You can type into the chat, you can type into the Q&A. Some specific examples that I might be able to help address would be ball flight, ball striking, if anybody feels like they're hitting the ground before or too thin, distance issues, pain, obviously common areas, and then struggling with your energy through the rounds. These are all things that we're drastically helping people with, and they're not necessarily going out and spending $1,700 on a new set of clubs. They're not taking lessons. These other things are important, but focusing on your body specifically will help address some of these things big time. Ball flight, and I'll just recap if nobody has any specific questions. Ball flight specifically, we're going to see a lot of people will call it a fade to be polite, but nasty, devastating slices from that over-the-top pattern. Ball striking, right? Are we hitting the ground before? Are we a little too fat? Steep club path. So going back to the over the top again, not having that inside to out or more neutral swing plane. Too thin. Sometimes too thin is going to be a result of the early extension. So as we stand up in the golf swing, our hands literally get a little bit higher. The club changes position from where we originally set up, and we maybe are topping balls, or we're a little too thin with balls. Distance issues, we talked about that in terms of over the top. All three of these things, right? Distance issues, I'm always overwhelmed about how much room for improvement people have on distance just by working on their body, because all three of these swing characteristics, the most common swing characteristics, they drastically affect your distance. So, we can improve distance by working on the body. And a lot of times it has a heck of a lot more to do than just increasing swing speed. Pain goes without saying, not going to elaborate too much on that. And then struggling with energy through rounds. I would think that the type of training that a lot of individuals will take on for themselves for golf-specific training is not appropriate. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. But a lot of us are doing, if we're struggling with energy through rounds, we think we need more cardio. So we'll hop on the treadmill or we'll walk, and we'll focus on the cardio aspect, which we would assume helps our endurance, and it does. And I'm not knocking cardio. If we can have it be a part of our program, it's fantastic. There's nothing like it. Struggling with energy through rounds, though, if you think about the golf swing, what you're doing is you're unloading a fair amount of power and speed in a very short period of time. And you're doing that, and then you're taking a 3-minute walk, 4-minute walk, exerting a lot of power on your second shot, and then taking a walk. And then around the green, it's a little bit more of that hip hinge. So a lot of what we're struggling with because of losing energy through rounds has to do with, are you able to repeatedly and consistently produce power and speed without your body deconditioning and starting to feel the effects of that over time? All right. So if there's no other specific questions or concerns that anybody wants me to hop on live, everybody that want to talk a little bit about how to work with us further. And of course, I would not be fully believing in what I do and fully believing in who we can help if I don't have something to offer you here at the end. So everybody that's registered for the webinar should have gotten an email from me for the equivalent of a digital voucher. And that voucher is good for either a free Titleist screen, where we're going to go through the full movement screen that I do. It's a part of the total evaluation that I do with golfers, but it's a large part. And we can do that online or in person. I'm also offering a 2D video analysis, which you can do one or the other. I'm not going to do both because that's a lot of time, and that's a huge value that a lot of people are paying me for. But I'll do one or the other. 2D video analysis, if you can send me a down the line and a front-on view of your golf swing, preferably with the camera about hands height, and we can do that online. I can run you through, I can basically load up my V1 app, and I can talk you through how things are looking. Or you can come in and we can do that in person as well, if you want to be really specific about setting the camera up properly. So the other thing that we have going is coming up in, I believe it's 2.5 weeks, 1.5 week, May 4th anyway. We're starting our 6-week bogey-free back and body program. So this program is the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of brave souls who have elected to work with me individually one-on-one and have seen benefit from it. I've taken the culmination of all of that and I've put it into a 6-week program, which is all online. There are certainly accountability pieces for you. We're going to do a accountability call each week. Basically, it's going to be a coaching call. So everybody in the program will get on a call similar to this, but it'll be a little bit more personal, where people will be able to chat. We'll have some open dialogue, talk about certain things that people are struggling with, and then I will coach you on that week's aspect. So just for example, week 1 is setting up in the ideal golf posture, right? Setting ourselves up for success. So our call will talk about the importance of that, really what we're looking for. And then that entire week, you will get home programming to wrap around what we talked about and really take action and intervention on that. And then as part of that, you're going to get, individual calls with me. You're going to get a free app that basically will have video programming and how often to do things, when to do it, all that good stuff. So, that would be an example of week one. It's a 6-week program. It's going to help basically for certain. I know for certain it's going to help you have a healthier back. It's going to help individuals that are struggling with stiffness, achiness in their back, maybe a chronic issue with back pain while they play. If you've had something really, really hot flared up specific, I don't recommend using this program as a way to diagnose anything or specifically cure anything. But if you've had general back issues in the past and you've tried different things and you're not all the way where you want to be, this is going to be a great program for you. Distance. I will be very, very confident about adding some distance. It's simple. If we knocked out 1 or 2 of these 3 swing characteristics tonight, your distance should go up, right? I hate to say it. People make excuses. Nothing feels better. I got brothers on the call right now. Nothing feels better than just blowing it past the people you're playing with. Ultimately, if you're halfway well-rounded and you have good approach shots, it should help you scoring-wise too. I do not always. So I just get the luxury of basking in my distance for maybe once or twice around over my brothers, and then I still lose anyway because I muff up the second shot. But distance off the tee, distance with longer irons, I feel very confident that this program will help you do that. Improve swing repeatability. We talked about what the club does is totally dictated by the body. So we want to get our body in place so that swing is repeatable and predictable, and that should help with accuracy. Talked about accountability in the group. You're going to get small group coaching. You have access to me. Basically, I'm going to be your online health coach for 6 weeks. I give you the nuts and bolts of the program, but if you call me at 10:30 at night, I'm going to do my damnedest to get back to you at 6:30 the next morning and get stuff figured out. You're going to have an individual golf performance program and then extras that are not available to the public. So I got the website up there. It's bit.ly/bogeyfreeback. I will pop that in the chat here so that you can copy and paste if you want to take a look at the registration page. But that would be the registration page. What we're doing is for the next 48 hours, I'm going to have the replay up for people that weren't able to make the call that registered, and then for you all as well. You're going to get the introductory price of $349. It's going to be a one-time price as a thank you for being on the webinar and for certainly investing your time early on with us. That's a significant value. That is that's basically that's 2 sessions with me in person. So the regular price for the program that's going to go up after the 48 hours is $579. I'm going to limit it to the first 20 people. I have people across the country that have interest already, but I want to make sure that people that have registered for this and given me their time have that early access to it. So first 20 people, make sure you hop over to the landing page, registration page, and then make sure you comment with any questions or reach out to me specifically. So I thank you for your time. I think that's enough of me rambling for one night. I am here at home. I think I got kids waiting to watch a movie with me. But you can contact me a couple different ways. Eric@modusrx.com. I apologize, that's kind of small, but ERIC@modusrx.com. Phone, that's personal, so you can text and tell me what a great job you think I did or how much off my rocker I am. Website, modusrx.com, and then the different social channels there. So I greatly appreciate your time. I hope everybody takes those self-assessments or tries those self-assessments if they haven't yet, and sees kind of where they're at and sees what room we got for improvement. And then if anybody has any questions about what we went over tonight, has any questions about the program that's coming up, happy to answer them anytime. But for this Wednesday night, I appreciate it. Once again, we help golfers build bogey-free backs and crush it off the tee so they can play pain-free. So we're happy to help anybody, and I really, really appreciate your time tonight. Hope everybody has a wonderful Wednesday evening. Thank you so much.